Hey, good morning, everyone. This is Dr. Anupriya, Assistant Professor in the Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology, SLIMS, Puducherry. So, the topic for session today is fibroid uterus. We'll be covering fibroid uterus under separate subheadings: definition, causes, signs and symptoms, fibroid in pregnancy, and then medical management, surgical management, and then recent advances in fibroid uterus. Definition. So fibroids are also called as fibromyomas or leiomyomas. Fibroids are the most common benign neoplasm that is arising from the uterus. These are benign tumors that arise from the smooth muscle cells of the uterus, but also contain varying amount of fibrous tissue. That is, in simpler, in clear form, there will be majority of smooth muscles will be there in the fibroid, and less amount of intervening fibrous tissues will be there. So fibroids are almost always low growing tumors. It can be either single or multiple in number. So as I already told, the fibroids are slow growing tumors. It takes about 3 to 5 years to be clinically palpable, unlike ovarian tumors. Most commonly seen in the women of reproductive age group. Size, shape, and location of fibroids can vary greatly in size. Size can vary from small size to bigger size, resembling a size of a watermelon. From smaller size can resemble a size of an apple seed. This is the schematic representation of different sizes and different shapes of fibroid uterus. So moving on to the anatomy of fibroid uterus, macroscopically, a typical myoma is a well-circumscribed tumor with a pseudocapsule. True capsule won't be present. It will be encircled by a pseudocapsule and it will be firm in consistency. On doing cut surface examination of the fibroids or fibromas, it will be pinkish white and it will have a characteristic old appearance. So the capsule consists of connective tissue which fixes the tumor to the surrounding myometrium. Moving on to the microscopic appearance of the fibroid, tumor consists mainly of bundles of plain muscle cells, smooth muscle cells of the uterus, and those smooth muscle cells will be separated by varying amount of fibrous strands. This is that smooth muscle cells that will be surrounded by varying amounts of fibrous strands. Areas of embryonic muscle tissue may be present in myomas. So moving on to the classification of uterine fibroids. Broadly, uterine fibroids will be classified into uterine fibroids and extrauterine fibroids. So uterine fibroids in turn is further divided into fibroids in the body of the uterus and fibroids that arise from the cervix. Cervical fibroids accounts for about 1% of all tumors. So cervical fibroids can be either anteriorly located, posterior, central or lateral depending upon the location to the cervix of the uterus. So body of the uterus fibroids are further classified into three. One major group of this body of uterus fibroid is intramural or interstitial fibroid, which accounts for about 75%. Second most common is the submucosal fibroid, that is 15%. And third most common, that is least common, is subserosal fibroid, that is 10%. Both subserosal and submucosal fibroids can be either sessile fibroids or pedunculated fibroids. Pedunculated fibroids are nothing but fibroids with a long pedicle. Subserosal fibroids can be either pedunculated parasitic fibroids or broad ligament fibroids. Moving on to these subclasses of types of the fibroids in detail, is first most commonest type is intramural fibroid. This fibroid typically grows symmetrically, remaining only within the myometrial wall. This is the most commonest type, that is 75%. On ultrasound examination, these fibroids will appear as a hypoechoic areas when compared to the surrounding hyperechoic myometrium. Second most commonest type is the submucosal fibroid. This fibroid grows towards the uterine cavity beneath the inner lining of the uterus. Second most commonest type, that is 15%. And it is again further divided into two types, as I already told. One is sessile fibroid and another one is pedunculated fibroid. This fibroid is responsible for majority of cases of infertility associated with fibroid uterus. Third, that is least most commonest type of fibroid is subserosal fibroid. This fibroid typically grows towards the peritoneal cavity. It is 10% common. It can be either sessile or pedunculated fibroid. Sessile means without pedicle, pedunculated means with pedicle. It will be there. Moving on to the extrauterine fibroids. Cervical fibroid. Fibroid which arise from the cervix is called as cervical fibroid. It accounts for about 1 to 4% of cases. It develops as either central, anterior, posterior or lateral fibroids. Lateral fibroids will grow typically into the broad ligament and they will ultimately appear as a pseudo broad ligament fibroid. So other sites of fibroid or Broad ligament fibroid. There are two types of broad ligament fibroid. One is true broad ligament and another one is pseudo broad ligament fibroid. So how to differentiate between these true and pseudo broad ligament fibroid is by the relationship to the uterus. True broad ligament fibroid arise lateral to the ureter, in relation to the ureter, not uterus. So true broad ligament fibroid arise lateral to the ureter. Pseudo broad ligament fibroid arise medial to the ureter. This pseudo broad ligament fibroid typically arises from the uterus, that is serosal surface of the uterus, and will get detached from the uterus and it will be present in the broad ligament. That is why it is called the pseudo broad ligament fibroid. It is not the true broad ligament fibroid. Now, other least commonest types are round ligament fibroid arising from the round ligament, ovarian ligament fibroids, and parasitic fibroids. Parasitic fibroid tumors arises from the uterus, gets detached from the uterus and gets its blood supply from the neighboring structures like omentum or surface of the intestine. That is why it is called as parasitic fibroids. Moving on to the most important classification of the fibroid uterus, that is FIGO classification, that is International Federation of Gynecologists and Obstetrician classification. According to this, there are 8 different varieties of fibroid uterus are there. First, type 0 to type 8 are there. Type 0, type 1 and type 2 are typically submucosal fibroids. Type 0 is completely within the uterine cavity, that is also called as pedunculated submucosal fibroids. Type 1 is less than 50% in the myometrium. Type 2 is more than or equal to 50% inside the myometrium. But these 3 are submucosal type of fibroids. There is a separate classification, histoscopic classification of submucosal fibroid, that is called as Bamsticker's classification. Type 0 and type 1 can be removed hysteroscopically. So this classification denotes the feasibility, hysteroscopic feasibility of removing the fibroids. So this is the FIGO classification of fibroid. 0, 1 and 2 explained earlier. 3 is completely intramural fibroid but abutting the touching the endometrial cavity. Type 4 is completely intramural without contact with either endometrium or serosal. Type 5 is subserosal fibroid more than or equal to 50% intramural. Type 6 is subserosal fibroid less than 50% intramural. Type 7 is pedunculated subserosal fibroid. Type 8 is cervical and parasitic fibroid. That is a special classification, special category of fibroid that is called as hybrid leiomyoma. So these type of leiomyoma will have contact with both endometrial cavity as well as peritoneal cavity, and that will be denoted by a number. That is why it is called as hybrid leiomyomas. Moving on to the secondary changes in fibroid. Most common secondary changes seen with the fibroid are atrophy, hyaline degeneration, cystic degeneration, osseous, that is calcareous degeneration, red degeneration, and sarcomatous degeneration or sarcomatous change. Sarcomatous change is the least degeneration, least type of change happening in the fibroid uterus, that is less than 0.5%. Atrophic degeneration is because of diminished vascularity after menopause. There will be shrinkage in the reduction in the size of the fibroid. So the fibroid will become firmer and fibrotic. So hyaline, cystic and fatty degenerations that occur in the central areas are of no clinical significance and are caused by diminished vascularity in large fibromyomas. Hyaline degeneration is the most commonest type of degeneration. In this type of degeneration, degenerative areas may be scattered as small patches or as an interlacing areas through the tumor. So this type of hyaline degenerated fibroids will typically lose its old appearance. Calcareous degeneration is nothing but phosphates and carbonates of lime will be deposited in the periphery along the pores of the vessels. They will resemble like tombstones in graveyards. Calcareous tumors are easily identified by radiography because they are phosphate and carbonates of lime. Red degeneration is this type of typical degeneration is commonly seen during pregnancy. It is because of thrombosis of the veins that can lead to ischemia and necrosis. So this center of the fibroid will be necrotic, will become necrotic and it will develop a fishy odor. Red degeneration. Treatment for this red degeneration is rest and analgesics. Sarcomatous changes not more than 0.5%. So the sarcomatous changes will be typically seen in women and will not be seen in women under the age of 40 years. It is typically seen in women who are postmenopausal, and characteristically these fibroids will rapidly grow in size and they will produce pain and postmenopausal bleeding in a postmenopausal woman. To the naked eye, the characteristic striking feature of the sarcomatous change is the non-encapsulation of the tumor, and naked eye appearance will be yellowish gray in color, and there will be areas of hemorrhage. Consistency will be softer and friable but not firm. Typical fibroid will be firm, but here it is soft and friable. So sarcomas are highly malignant and they spread by bloodstream hematogenous route. Fibroid etiology and clinical symptoms. So what are the causes for fibroid, and we'll see how the fibroids will present. So moving on to the etiology, each leiomyoma arises from a single smooth muscle cell of the myometrium. So causes can be least proportion will be explained by the genetic changes. Unique defects involving chromosomes 6, 7, 12 and 14 correlates with the rates and direction of the tumor growth. Specific genetic mutations involve MED12 gene, HMG A2 gene, FS gene. These genetic mutations also will predispose to development of leiomyomas. Hormonal effects. Leiomyomas are hormone dependent benign tumors. So they're dependent on estrogen as well as progestogen for their growth. So the myomas are rarely found before puberty and also after menopause. That is why fibroids typically seen during the reproductive age groups. So treatment with mifepristone. Mifepristone is a type of anti-progesterone. So treatment with mifepristone will typically shrink the size of the fibroid. Risk factors for development of fibroid, reproductive age group, early menarche, so the patient will have long period of exposure to the hormones like estrogen and progestogen. Obesity again will predispose to increased circulating levels of estrogens. PCOS, in PCOS there will be unopposed estrogenic excess will be there, nulliparity women, and racial factors. Fibroids are more common in African American women, and family history of fibroid in the mother and sister can lead to fibroid uterus in the patient also. Symptoms. Most of the fibroids are asymptomatic. The symptoms are directly proportional to the anatomical site and size of the fibroid. Menstrual abnormality like menorrhagia, metrorrhagia can be there, excessive bleeding can be there, irregular bleeding can be there, and patient will also have dysmenorrhea and dyspareunia depending upon the size and the site of the fibroid. Infertility are typically seen with submucosal fibroid. Pressure symptoms are typically seen with large fibroids, large intramural fibroids, and subserosal fibroids, cervical fibroids. Lower abdominal pain or pelvic pain and abdominal swelling or abdominal lump can be complained by the patient. So these are the symptoms, presenting symptoms of fibroid uterus. Menorrhagia, classical symptom of fibroid uterus is menorrhagia, that is excessive bleeding in terms of duration as well as amount. So the reason for this menorrhagia is because of increased surface area of the lining endometrium and interference with the normal uterine contractility due to interposition of the fibroid so that the vessels won't contract. Congestion and dilatation of the adjacent endometrial venous plexus, endometrial hyperplasia because of hyperestrogenism, because of anovulation, and there is a role of prostanoids, that is prostaglandins. There will be imbalance between thromboxane A2 and prostacyclins. Prostacyclin is a vasodilatory prostaglandin, so that levels will be increased. Metrorrhagia or irregular bleeding can be because of ulceration of the submucosal fibroid or fibroid polyp. Torn vessels from the sloughing base of a polyp can also be the reason for this irregular bleeding, and associated endometrial carcinoma can also be there. Dysmenorrhea. Dysmenorrhea is nothing but pain associated with menstruation and excessive bleeding. Congestive variety of this dysmenorrhea may be because of pelvic congestion or endometriosis, coexistent endometriosis. Spasmodic type is associated with extrusion. Uterus will try to extrude the penetrated submucosal fibroid or fibroid polyp. So because of that, patient can have spasmodic type of pain. So the dysmenorrhea can be typically either congestive type or spasmodic type of dysmenorrhea can be there. Infertility will be seen in 1 to 3% of infertility solely because of leiomyomas. Out of 100% of infertility, 1 to 3% is because of leiomyomas or fibroids. This is because of the uterine causes as well as tubal causes. There will be distortion and elongation of the uterine cavity. This makes difficult sperm ascent. Disruption of the normal uterine contractions that can lead to impact sperm transport. Congestion and dilatation of the endometrial venous plexus that can lead to defective implantation. Atrophy and ulceration of the endometrium over the submucosal fibroid can lead to defective implantation. So ultimately, it is affecting the sperm transport as well as implantation. So by this, it causes infertility. Not only that, but also because of tubal causes. So there will be cornual block because of the position of the fibroid. If the fibroid is located in the fundus near the cornua, it can block the cornua and mark a dilatation of the tube over a big fibroid and associated salpingitis with tubal block can be there. Lower abdominal pain, fibroids are usually painless. Pain can be because of the complications of the tumor. So because of degeneration, right? Degeneration can lead to pain. Torsion of the fibroid, hemorrhage into the fibroid can also lead to pain. And associated pelvic pathologies like endometriosis as well as pelvic inflammatory disease can also lead to pain in a patient who is having fibroid uterus. Pressure symptoms. Enlarged uterus can cause pressure symptoms in the adjacent organs, that is urinary bladder as well as rectum. Increased that the patient can experience increased urinary frequency, urinary retention or constipation. A broad ligament fibroid can compress ureter that can lead to hydroureter or hydrourethronephrotic changes can be there because of a broad ligament fibroid. Abdominal swelling. Patient can have a sensation of heaviness in the lower abdomen and lump in the lower abdomen can be there. Moving on to the signs. On general examination, anemia will be present because of abnormal uterine bleeding. So on abdominal examination, mass can be felt per abdomen if the tumor is sufficiently enlarged. Firm and consistency and surface will be nodular. Margins are well defined except the lower pole. Lower pole, we can't elicit the lower pole in case of uterine origin of the swelling. Side to side mobility will be present. Mobility is restricted from above downwards. Pelvic examination. Bimanual pelvic examination reveals irregular enlargement of the uterus. Cervix moves with the movement of the tumor felt per abdomen. Uterus is not felt separated from the swelling. Blue sign will not be positive in case of fibroid uterus or any other uterine mass. Effect of pregnancy on fibroid uterus. So during pregnancy, progesterone levels will be moved. There will be increase in the size of the fibroid uterus and there will be increase in vascularity also. There will be higher tendency of the fibroid to undergo degenerative changes such as hyaline changes, cystic changes. Red degeneration also occurs during the pregnancy. Red degeneration is because of thrombosis of the veins in the fibroid. So history and examination, patient will complain of severe pain in the abdomen that can present as acute abdominal emergency. So examination reveals pain to be restricted to the uterus around the site of the fibroid and all the other parameters remain stable. Treatment for such patient is conservative always with bed rest and analgesics. Effect of fibroid on pregnancy. Fibroid will have deleterious effect on pregnancy. It can range from spontaneous miscarriage in the first trimester or early second trimester, preterm labor in second and third trimester, abnormal fetal lie or fetal presentation. For example, breech presentation can be there, placental abruption can be there, premature separation of placenta before onset of labor, and then intrauterine fetal retardation, postpartum hemorrhage because uterus can't contract that much. And dystocia can occur during labor. After delivery also, there will be more chances of puerperal sepsis and uterine inversion can happen during third stage of labor while trying to remove the placenta. So these are the deleterious effects of fibroid on pregnancy. So it is always important to monitor the patient vigilantly, intrapartum as well as antepartum and postpartum. Investigations for fibroid uterus includes, first of all, blood investigations such as complete blood count, blood grouping and RS typing, bleeding time and clotting time of the patient, baseline liver function test and baseline renal function test are required so that we can take up the patient if at all we are taking up the patient for any surgical intervention in the near future. Hemoglobin to rule out anemia that will be covering while doing complete blood count. And then urine examination including urine routine examination, and if patient is having urinary symptoms, you can also order for urine culture and sensitivity examination. Ultrasound abdomen and pelvis to identify the site and the size of the tumor. Number of fibroids, type of the fibroid, endometrial cavity and endometrial thickness can be seen in case of ultrasound abdomen. Adnexal mass can be seen, associated adenomyosis can be there. Pressure effect on the ureter can be there that can present as hydroureter and hydrourethronephrosis. So these are some of the ultrasound images showing fibroid uterus. In ultrasound, fibroid uterus will present as a hypoechoic mass. So we can also order for Doppler ultrasound. Doppler ultrasound will show vascularity of the uterus in fibroids. It can differentiate between fibroid and localized adenomyosis. So in fibroid uterus, the blood flows around the fibroid, but blood flow diffuses through adenomyosis. So this is how we can differentiate between fibroid uterus and adenomyosis. So we can also go for hysteroscopy if we are suspecting submucosal fibroid. This is performed in cases of infertility associated with fibroid to look for any submucosal fibroid in the endometrial cavity. It can be both diagnostic as well as therapeutic. We can try removing the fibroid hysteroscopically. Hysteroscopic myomectomy can be done in type 0 and type 1, Hamsticus classification. One another investigation is saline infusion sonography. It can diagnose submucosal fibroid performed in cases of fibroid infertility. This is used to check the patency of the fallopian tubes. So we can also order for laparoscopy if we are suspecting subserosal fibroid as well as a big intramural fibroid. Other investigations includes intravenous pyelography, pyelogram or pyelography, also called as IVP. It is indicated in a large fibroid, a broad ligament fibroid, when you are anticipating compression over the ureter. And then cervical fibroid to check the anatomy and course of the ureter and to identify the pelvic kidneys. And other modality of investigation, higher modality of investigation than ultrasound examination is computed tomography of pelvis, and magnetic resonance imaging of the pelvis can also be done for mapping of the fibroid. Treatment. Moving on to the treatment part, treatment consists of both conservative, also called as expectant management, and another one is expectant management, not doing anything, only annual follow-up is required, and another one is medical management with some drugs, medications, and another one is surgery, minimally invasive surgery. That is a newer, that is a modernized technique for the treatment of fibroid, and another one is surgical management. So treatment may be as follows. So expected management can be done for 6 months to assess the growth of the fibroid. Second line is medical management. Third line is non-surgical. That is newer modalities like uterine artery embolization can be tried, and minimally invasive surgeries can be done, and surgeries at the last if everything fails and if the patient fits into the category criteria for surgery. Expected management is done for asymptomatics, very small fibroids, only annual follow-up is recommended for those patients. Asymptomatic myomas, observation and regular follow-up. So the criteria for selecting patients for this follow-up are size of the uterus should be less than 12 weeks, uncomplicated pregnancy with a single fibroid. You have to counsel the patient and you have to annually assess the patient for symptoms, USG, and you have to interfere as and when required. Indications for treatment in an asymptomatic fibroid is when patient is not having any of the symptoms. In such cases also you have to treat the patient in some conditions. So the following are such conditions. One is infertility caused by corneal fibroid and abortion due to a submucosal fibroid. And second is a fibroid more than 12 week size and pedunculated fibroid which can cause torsion in the patient. An asymptomatic fibroid causing pressure on the ureter and bladder, rapidly growing fibromyomas in a postmenopausal woman that can give this idea, that can warn you about a sarcomatous change occurring in the fibroid. The nature of the tumor cannot be ascertained clinically, whereas all symptomatic fibroid will require either medical, surgical, or minimally invasive surgeries. Medical treatment. Advantages and disadvantages are there for medical treatment. Advantages include this avoids anesthesia and surgical risk, and this cures patient of hemorrhagia and pressure symptoms, and this reduces the size of the tumor and blood supply to the tumor so that less post-operative or perioperative bleeding can be there. Allows laparoscopic myomectomy by reducing vascularity as well as size of the tumor, fibromyoma. Disadvantage of this medical treatment are side effects of the drug do not allow treatment for indefinite period. Failure of treatment, recurrence of symptoms and regrowth after stoppage of treatment can be there. That is, relapse can be there. Surgery may still be required in some patients even after giving this full medical treatment. So these are some of the disadvantages of medical treatment. Medical management includes correction of anemia with either oral or intravenous iron preparations or with PAD or BC transfusion. Drugs used for control of heavy menstrual bleeding, or it can be grouped into non-hormonal, hormonal groups. Non-hormonal, more commonly used drugs are NSAIDs, out of which mefenamic acid 500 milligram 3 times a day can be given during menstruation. The dose starts from 250 milligram to 500 milligram. Tranexamic acid, which is an antifibrinolytic agent, which can be given in the dose of 500 milligram to 1 gram 3 times a day for 3 to 5 days during menstruation. This can reduce heavy menstrual bleeding. Hormonal management includes gonadotropin releasing hormone analogs. One example of one such drug is injection leuprolide acetate. The dose is 3.75 milligram every monthly intramuscularly, not more than 6 months. This decreases uterine volume by 35% and fibroid volume by 30%, and it also reduces the bleeding. So the side effects or post-menopausal symptoms can arise in the patient when it is taken for more than 6 months duration. In those patients, you have to give ANTAC therapy with estrogen and progesterone. Another group of drug which can be tried in case of fibroid uterus is olipristal acetate, that is UPA, which is a selective progesterone receptor modulator with a pure antagonistic activity on the progesterone receptor. UPA in the dose of 5 to 10 milligram orally daily for 12 weeks will cause amenorrhea, decrease the menstrual blood loss, and reduction in myoma volume. So this drug hemoglobin levels can be increased. Another group of drug is mifepristone, as I already told, that is also called as RU486, that can be given in the dose of 10 to 20 milligram daily for 3 months. This also can lead to amenorrhea, as there is more than 90% reduction in menstrual blood loss and reduction in fibroid volume. And another group of drug which is very much beneficial in case of fibroid uterus are combined oral contraceptives with low dose of estrogen. This is used for control of heavy menstrual bleeding. And this progesterone containing intrauterine system can be tried. LNG IUS, and the commercial name is Mirena. This should be used in only selected women fibroid associated with heavy menstrual bleeding. It cannot be used in a woman who's having distorted endometrial cavity. Other drugs include GnRH antagonist. Example for GnRH antagonist are Citrorelix, Ganirelix, and these drugs will reduce 29% or 29% reduction in the fibroid volume within 3 weeks itself. But there can be hyperestrogenic symptoms can be there. Aromatase inhibitors such as letrozole can also be tried. Danazol is not used nowadays because of its androgenic side effects in the women. So that's all regarding the medical management of fibroid uterus. Moving on to the surgical treatment for fibroid uterus. Like medical management, surgical management also will have some of the advantages and some of the disadvantages. Advantages includes it removes the fibroid and cures the patient of symptoms in one sitting itself. This improves fertility in 40% of cases, and risk of malignancy is also eliminated. Disadvantages includes risk of anesthesia and surgery, risk of post-operative adhesions, recurrence of fibroid due to growth seedling fibroids, that is 5 to 10% of fibroids will be missed. Because of that, fibroid can recur in some patients. Persistence of menorrhagia in 5 to 10% because of congestion and enlarged uterine cavity, and congestion of ovaries also. If the ovaries are left behind, that can lead to this thing, menorrhagia. Indications of surgery in an asymptomatic patient include size more than 12 weeks, almost always requires surgical management. Pregnancy with torsion of pedunculated subserosal fibroid, pedunculated cornual fibroid which is causing infertility, requires surgical management. So the different types of surgeries for fibroid uterus can be myomectomy, hysterectomy can be done. There are different routes for myomectomy and different routes for hysterectomy. Myomectomy refers to the removal of fibroid leaving the uterus. This indicated in infertile women who want to preserve their childbearing function, reproductive function. It can be done either abdominally, laparoscopically, vaginally, or hysteroscopically. 4 routes it can be done myomectomy. Preoperative requisites before doing this myomectomy or auto-transfusion. That is, anemia should be corrected, endometrial cancer should be ruled out with TNC, and consent should be obtained for hysterectomy. If intraoperative bleeding cannot be controlled, then consent for hysterectomy should be applied even prior to surgery. Hemoglobin should be restored. Myomectomy should be performed in pre-ovulatory menstrual cycle, and other causes of that is male factor infertility should almost always be ruled out before proceeding with the procedure called myomectomy. Technique for this myomectomy: opening of abdominal cavity by phalansteal incision, as we do for other hysterectomies. Uterus should be mobile and less than 16 to 20 week size. A vertical paramedian incision can be given if the uterus is larger, uterus is fixed with adhesions and associated PAD in endometriosis or suspected. So either abdominal phalansteal incision can be given or vertical paramedian incision can be given. Hemorrhage during myomectomy can be controlled by myomectomy clamp, round ligament with uterine vessels, ovarian vessels temporarily occluded with a sponge forceps, that is myomectomy clamp, or rubber tourniquet can be applied in case of cervical fibroids. Local injection of diluted vasopressin. Vasopressin in the dose of 20 units diluted in 100 ml normal saline can be injected intraneurally to control bleeding in case of fibroid uterus. So the steps for this myomectomy includes, it starts with incision of capsule and fibroid is enucleated using myomectomy screws. Hemostasis secured and cavity is obliterated with several carotid sutures and clamped and released, and hemostasis is confirmed. Raw visceral areas are peritonized to prevent post-operative adhesions. Hydroflotation also reduces the adhesions. Uterus anteverted by placating the round ligament with non-absorbable sutures. Uterus should be anteverted. So that's all regarding abdominal myomectomy. Another route for myomectomy is vaginal myomectomy that can be done in case of cervical fibroids, pedunculated fibroid polyp, and if more than 50% of submucosal fibroid projects into the cavity of the uterus. And another modality of myomectomy is laparoscopic myomectomy. It is visible in pedunculated fibroid, subserosal fibroid of size less than 10 cm, not more than 4 in number. Disadvantages of lap myomectomy: more bleeding will be there, post-operative adhesions will be there, and scar rupture can be there in subsequent pregnancies if you do myomectomy laparoscopically. Laparoscopic myomectomy may not be safe in an infertile woman. Then another surgical modality is hysterectomy. Hysterectomy is nothing but removing the uterus. There are some indications for removing the uterus. So those indications are women more than 40 years, multiparous women who have completed their family, associated malignancy, uncontrolled bleeding, or unforeseen surgical difficulties encountered during myomectomy should always go for hysterectomy. Types of hysterectomy includes, depending upon the different routes of hysterectomy, it includes abdominal hysterectomy, vaginal hysterectomy, and laparoscopic hysterectomy. Abdominal can be either total, subtotal. For subtotal hysterectomy, fibroid should not be there in the cervix. And pan hysterectomy, external and Bernheim's hysterectomy are there. Subtotal hysterectomy is nothing but leaving the cervix behind and removing other parts of the uterus. Advantages of subtotal hysterectomy: cervix retained for sexual functions, wall prolapse is less common when subtotal hysterectomy is done, and less bleeding and less risk of bladder and ureteric trauma will be there. Increased surgical morbidity in total hysterectomy will be less in subtotal hysterectomy. So what about the ovaries? What will you do to the ovaries while removing the uterus? Ovaries will be conserved in benign condition to avoid post-menopausal symptoms in a premenopausal woman. A woman who's in her reproductive age group, ovaries should be conserved, provided they look normal. If the ovaries look abnormal macroscopically, it is better to remove the ovaries. But while conserving the ovaries, there are some concerns that should be kept on mind. So disadvantages of conserving ovaries includes benign or malignant ovarian tumor may develop in 1% of cases in the future. Residual ovarian syndrome will cause dyspareunia, and atrophy of ovaries due to kinking of ovarian vessels can be there. So these are the advantages of conserving the ovaries. Vaginal hysterectomy. So removing the uterus through vaginal route is called as vaginal hysterectomy. The prerequisites for doing vaginal hysterectomy are uterus should be mobile uterus, size should not be more than 14 weeks, and no previous surgeries and no pelvic pathology should be there, like endometriosis and PAD. Because of endometriosis and PAD, there can be adhesions. So it is not a good approach in nulliparous women with narrow vagina. Vaginal hysterectomy. So vaginal hysterectomy can be done for uterine size more than 12 weeks when uterus is not fixed by adhesions, adnexal inflammatory mass, or endometriosis should not be there. Then by performing previous laparoscopy, bisection of uterus, and removing each half of the uterus separately, that can be tried if the uterine size is more than 12 weeks. And myomectomy and enucleation of the fibroid first and marcellation can be done. So this is how you can do vaginal hysterectomy in the uterus which is more than 12 weeks size. Laparoscopic assisted vaginal hysterectomy can also be tried. Advantages and disadvantages. Advantages and contraindications for this LAVH procedure or advantages are it avoids abdominal scar, it minimizes pain, it shortens the recovery period. Laparoscopic assisted vaginal hysterectomy shortens this thing. Contraindications for this LAVH includes uterine size more than 14 to 16 weeks in size. In such size uterus, you can't remove the uterus properly by LAVH vaginal route. Fibroid located in the broad ligament, cervical fibroids, and extensive pelvic conditions in endometriosis. If at all it is present, then LAVH cannot be performed. Complications of hysterectomy includes primary, reactionary, and secondary hemorrhage can be there because of slippage of ligature. Reactionary hemorrhage can be there, and trauma to the adjacent organs like bladder, ureter, and bowel can occur. Sepsis can occur. Anesthetic complications can occur. Paralytic ileus, intestinal obstruction due to postoperative conditions can be there. Thrombosis, pulmonary embolism, chest infections can be there in the postoperative period because of immobilization and dehydration. Burst abdomen and incisional hernia can develop in the future. Postoperative infections such as wound infection, peritonitis, pelvic infection, and embolization can happen. Chronic pelvic pain can be there. Abdominal adhesions cause chronic abdominal pain. Dyspareunia, wall prolapse can be there. Residual ovarian syndrome and atrophy of the ovaries due to decreased vascularity causing premature menopause in 2 to 3 women. That is because of atrophy of the ovaries, because of decreased blood supply, because of thinking of the ovarian vessels. Ovarian cancer in 1% if ovaries are left behind during hysterectomy, urinary dysfunction due to denervation of the bladder. So the patient can lose control over the bladder. They can have urinary incontinence. Granulation tissue at the wall prolapse, site can occur. Differential diagnosis for fibroid can be hematometra, pyometra, pregnancy, adenomyosis, bicoordinate uterus, endometriosis, ectopic pregnancy, chronic PID, ovarian tumor, chronic inversion, full bladder, bilateral tubovarian masses, pelvic endometriosis, endometrial cancer, uterine sarcoma, ovarian neoplasms, fibroid polyps, para-ovarian cyst, pelvic kidneys. So in few conditions, you can able to differentiate with the clinical symptoms. In some conditions that will require ultrasound examination as well as endometrial biopsy study will be needed to differentiate between each of the differential diagnoses. Newer minimally invasive procedures that has been successfully introduced in recent years are 3. First is uterine artery embolization that will be done by interventional radiologists. You will be blocking the uterine arteries. An MRI guided focused ultrasound and laparoscopic myolysis can be tried. Uterine artery embolization in 1991, a person called Jacques Ravina, a French gynecologist, first performed this uterine artery embolization preoperatively to reduce vascularity and size of the uterus, improvement of symptoms. Menorrhagia was relieved in 80 to 90% of cases, pressure symptoms in 40 to 70% of cases, and volume of the fibroid is reduced by 50% at the end of 3 months, and 60% at 6 months, and 75% at the end of 1 year. Thus, this technique is now employed successfully in selected cases. This uterine artery embolization. Contraindications for this uterine artery embolization are subserosal pedunculated fibroids, because these fibroids can get necrosed and fall into the peritoneal cavity. So big fibroid tumors are not suited for UAE. Submucosal fibroid is not cured with uterine artery embolization. Infertility rate may increase following this technique because of post-embolization pelvic adhesions. Calcified fibroid cannot shrink with this technique. Associated inflammatory disease may also preclude the employment. We can't do this uterine artery embolization if at all any pelvic inflammation is present. Technique. Under local sedation, bilateral uterine artery embolization is approached. Bilateral uterine artery is approached to percutaneous femoral catheterization. Polyvinyl alcohol, that is PDA particles, gel foam, or metal coil will be introduced inside the uterine artery. Embolization reduces vascularity and size of the fibroid in 3 to 4 months, 40% at 6 weeks, and 75% at 1 year. Postoperative complications of this uterine embolization includes fever, infection, profuse vaginal discharge and bleeding can be there, ischemic pain can be there, pulmonary embolism can be there, ovarian failure because of accidental ovarian vessel blockage, Fertility rate is reduced because of post-embolization, adhesion, pelvic adhesion formation, expression of fibroid within the peritoneal cavity, allergic reaction, and contrast-induced renal failure can be there. Radiation exposure, exclusion of subserosal fibroid into the peritoneal cavity, and intraperitoneal adhesion formation can be there. Other indications for uterine embolization includes, other than besides fibroid, can also be employed in case of arteriovenous aneurysm that is leading to menorrhagia and postpartum hemorrhage, PPH and obstetrics. Placenta creta to reduce bleeding prior to placental removal or during cesarean delivery. Advantages of UAE. It is not a major surgery, no intraoperative bleeding, short hospital stay, less abdominal adhesion. 75 to 80% of women are satisfied with this procedure called as uterine artery embolization. Another procedure is MRI guided percutaneous laser ablation. That is also called as high intensity focused ultrasound. Under MRI guidance will be directed towards the fibroid. This generates a heat of 45 degrees centigrade at the focused point of the fibroid for a few seconds. Only this ablates the vessels as well as the tumor. Woman is able to return to work in 2 days' time. The technique can also find a place in the treatment of adenomyosis, fibroid as well as adenomyosis, IFU. This is the schematic representation of how this MRI focused ultrasound is done. Contraindications, calcified fibroid. In calcified fibroid, both urinary embolization and MRI focused ultrasound both are not effective. And in case of degenerated fibroids. Advantages, it is non-invasive, local anesthesia is sufficient, no hospitalization, no scar, quick recovery, fertility preservation procedure. Another newer modality is laparoscopic myolysis. This is an optional surgery which is using Nd:YAG laser, yttrium aluminum garnet laser, cryoprobe or diathermy to coagulate a subserosal fibroid. It is used in a multiparous women. The contraindication complications are similar to that of uterine artery embolization. So this completes the topic fibroid uterus. So we have covered definition, causes, microscopic appearance, macroscopic appearance, clinical signs and symptoms, investigation including blood investigations, urine investigations, and imaging techniques, and treatment. Treatment including expectant management, medical management, and surgical management. Thank you.